Hey guys, tonight we slip back into a time when mornings didn't begin with alarms or hot showers, but with the creak of wood, the rustle of straw, and the undeniable aroma of damp wool. You're waking up in your tiny cottage, the sun just peeking through the cracks in the shutters. Your bed, if we can be generous, is a lumpy mattress stuffed with straw, stitched into an old linen sack that hasn't seen a wash in months. The straw crunches beneath you as you shift, poking your back in just the wrong places, making you wish you hadn't slept on your side, or your back, or really, at all. Sleep in this era is something of a gamble. If the lice didn't get to you, the fleas surely had their turn. And you're not alone in this bed. Most families sleep in a pile for warmth. A sibling's foot in your face? Normal. A cat nesting by your knees? Also normal. The occasional rat scratching under the bed frame. Well, that's just part of the ambiance. The mattress itself, called a palliasse, gets restuffed maybe twice a year if you're lucky, and that's only if the hay or oat straw hasn't already gone moldy. Historians still argue whether folks of lower status genuinely got used to the constant itching or simply ignored it out of survival. What's certain is that nobody rolled out of one of these with a spring in their step, unless of course it was an actual spring from a broken bed slat poking through. You sit up slowly, every joint complaining. Your breath fogs the chilly morning air. The fire from last night is out, leaving only ashes. And as you swing your feet to the ground, you hope, pray even, that you remembered to move the chamber pot last night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. There's no snooze button here. The first thing you hear, before your own thoughts even have time to wake up, is that rooster. Not your rooster, mind you, but the neighbor's. His name's Thomas, the neighbor, not the rooster, though the rooster probably has one too. Let's just call him Reginald. Reginald the rooster starts crowing the moment the first streaks of pink hit the horizon, reminding you that you live in a world where light dictates labor, and Reginald doesn't care how late you stayed up weaving wool, watching the fire crackle, or dealing with your younger brother's night cough. There are no curtains to draw, only shutters, and they don't block much. The light seeps in through the warped wood, and with it comes the awareness of chores waiting outside. Animals need feeding, firewood needs chopping, and if it rained last night, there's mud to navigate, and not just the clean kind. Even the term mud feels generous in some parts of your village. You stretch again, but quickly remember the limits of your straw mattress and the ache in your lower back. Someone in the household is already stirring, probably your mother, stoking the hearth to life with what little coal you've got. You smell the first traces of smoke curling through the cracks in the wattle and daub walls. Sunrise is your master clock, and those who sleep past it risk being labeled lazy, a dangerous thing in a world where reputation means survival. Time here isn't measured in minutes, but in tasks. The length of a prayer, the boiling of a pot, the milking of a cow, and even then, the cow may not cooperate. Historians still debate whether rural villages rose this early year-round, or only when agricultural demands called for it. But either way, once you're up, you're up. And Reginald, he's still going. You start to wonder if roast rooster might be on the menu come Sunday. You finally manage to drag yourself upright. But now comes the next battle, getting out from under the threadbare blanket and exposing yourself to the icy morning air. It's not just cold, it's the kind of damp chill that sneaks into your bones and refuses to leave. The cottage walls are made of wattle and daub, a medieval mix of woven sticks packed with mud and straw. It's rustic, charming, and absolutely useless against winter. No insulation means you've spent the night breathing out small clouds, your toes curled tightly beneath rough wool socks. Or if those have worn out, just your own calloused feet. There's no central heating here, just a small hearth that may or may not have stayed lit through the night, and some coals that now glow dully under a layer of ash. If someone didn't rise before dawn to rekindle it, you're starting your day with numb fingers and frozen water jugs. Speaking of frozen, the chamber pot. Yes, you kept one near the bed. It's better than stumbling out into the yard in the middle of the night, especially with wild dogs or the occasional thief about. But in the dead of winter, chamber pots offer their own surprise, a chilly splashback that reminds you instantly that life here is never entirely dignified. You tiptoe across the rough wooden floor, wincing with each cold step. There's no privacy, no ensuite, and definitely no toilet paper. If you're lucky, someone remembered to cut up old rags or gathered dry moss. If not, well, you start the day with an adventure. Modern historians point out that people back then likely didn't register the cold in quite the same way we do. They were more accustomed to discomfort. Still, diary entries and folk songs mention those bitter, bone-deep mornings enough to make it clear. It wasn't romantic. It was just survival. As you fumble for your tunic in the dim light, you briefly wonder if anyone, ever, in any era, has truly enjoyed getting out of bed. Now that your teeth are chattering and your extremities are vaguely awake, it's time for morning hygiene, though calling it that might be giving it too much credit. There's no toothbrush, no hot water, and no mirror, unless you count a cloudy bit of polished metal or a calm puddle outside. You reach for the small basin in the corner, if you remembered to fill it the night before, and splash your face with water that feels like it came straight from a melted glacier. It doesn't so much refresh you as momentarily paralyze your cheeks. To clean your teeth, you might chew on the end of a birch twig, fraying it into bristles, or dip your finger into a mixture of salt and charcoal. There's no minty freshness here, just the faint flavor of whatever you ate last night and the knowledge that cavities are coming for you with medieval vengeance. There's a rag near the hearth for washing, but soap is a luxury. If your family makes it, it's a lumpy gray mess of lard and wood ash, efficient at removing grime, but equally good at removing skin. And even that's reserved for special occasions. Daily washing. Most villagers would find that laughably indulgent. Historians still argue whether medieval folk were truly filthy or just operating with a different idea of clean. But when the entire village smells like goats, no one really notices if you skipped a scrub. You check for lice. Again, everyone has them. You don't talk about them, but you all do that same nonchalant scratch behind the ear like it's a nervous tick. If you're extra fancy, there might be a comb carved from bone tucked into your belt. If not, you'll spend the day running your fingers through your hair, pretending it's just windy. Getting presentable mostly involves smoothing your tunic, shaking straw out of your cloak, and hoping nobody notices the hay stuck to your back. Hygiene here isn't about freshness, it's about function. If you're not bleeding or covered in actual mud, you're already ahead of the game. Your stomach begins to rumble as you shuffle toward the hearth, hoping for something warm to make up for the rude awakening. Breakfast in the Middle Ages doesn't come with eggs, bacon, or any kind of joyful sizzle. Instead, you're greeted by a pot of gruel, barley or oats boiled with water, maybe a splash of milk if the cow's in a generous mood. There's no cinnamon, no sugar, and certainly no maple syrup. What you get is a grayish, gluey substance that somehow manages to be both lumpy and runny. The consistency depends on the cook's attention span and how close you live to starvation. It smells faintly earthy, with a whiff of smoke and damp spoon. Sometimes the porridge has been cooking since before dawn, congealing gently by the side of the fire. Other times it's the same batch reheated from yesterday and the day before. One joke passed around the hearth says it gets better every time it's boiled, like a fine wine. This is a lie. You scoop your portion from the common pot with a wooden spoon, still warm from the hands of the last person who used it. There's a hair in the bowl. You flick it away without blinking. Texture is the real enemy here. It's the kind of breakfast that clings to your ribs and possibly your dignity. Still, you eat because food is fuel, and you'll need it for hauling water, tending animals, or trudging through mud. Historians have found that peasants across Europe depended heavily on potages and porridges, easy to make, easy to stretch, and nearly impossible to ruin, though you wouldn't know it by the flavor. Spices, those are for the nobility. The best you can hope for is a pinch of salt or a sprig of thyme if someone remembered to dry it. You swallow spoonful after spoonful, staring at the fire and imagining toast, a word you've never heard, but your heart somehow longs for it anyway. If gruel isn't on the menu, or if you're just desperate for something with more flavor, you turn your hopeful eyes to the iron pot hanging over last night's embers. Inside may still be a bit of stew, left to sit overnight like a culinary time capsule. This stew isn't glamorous. It's a murky mixture of root vegetables, maybe a few shreds of salted meat, and a handful of dried peas or lentils. The broth is thick, vaguely brown, and smells like every meal your family's had this month, boiled into one. You stir it gently with a ladle, checking for anything new, maybe a forgotten bit of onion or a scrap of rabbit if someone was lucky hunting. Most likely, it's the same stew you've eaten for the past 4 days, gradually thickening with each reheating and slowly transforming into a kind of edible paste. Medieval cooks called this perpetual stew, and that's not an exaggeration. Some households kept their pot going for weeks, just topping it off each day with whatever was available. You're basically eating history by the spoonful. The good news? It's warm. The bad news? There's a thin layer of grease floating on top, and the bread you dip into it could double as a self-defense weapon. Still, it fills you, and in this world, that's what matters. Hunger is a constant specter, and a second helping is never guaranteed. Some households throw in herbs, parsley, sage, or whatever's growing near the pigpen. Others use ale or sour whey to stretch the broth. You once heard a tale of a stew with actual spices in it. Pepper, maybe even saffron. But that probably came from someone who works in the manor kitchens, not someone like you. Historians still debate whether this kind of communal cooking was born out of necessity or practicality. Likely both. What's certain is that flavor took a back seat to calories, and most meals felt more like survival than celebration. You slurp quietly, hoping no one else wakes up in time to claim the last soggy carrot chunk drifting at the bottom. As you wipe the last of the lukewarm stew from your wooden bowl with a piece of crusty bread that might once have been soft, maybe back in the previous century, you hear the unmistakable bleat of the family goat. She's poking her head through the doorframe, bold as ever. Her name's Agnes, and she doesn't knock. In fact, Agnes, like most animals in your village, lives more or less with you, not beside you. With you. Medieval cottages are often single-room affairs. There's a hearth, a table, some sleeping space. And then there are the animals. Goats, pigs, chickens, maybe a cow if you're well off. It's not just convenience, it's protection. Outside, predators and thieves lurk. Inside, the livestock provide warmth, even if they're not exactly hygienic heating systems. The scent of your home? Equal parts smoke, sweat, and barnyard. Feeding time is a team sport. You tear off a piece of stale bread, toss it to Agnes, and try not to wince as she nudges your knee for more. The chickens peck at the floor for dropped grains. You might be trying to eat, but they see this as an open buffet. If you leave your bowl unattended for 5 seconds, someone with feathers will take a taste. Historians note that in most medieval homes, the line between human and animal space was incredibly thin. There wasn't really a concept of indoors as we know it today. Even pigs sometimes slept near the hearth. And while that might seem unsanitary now, you'd be surprised how comforting it is on a frigid winter night to have a warm, snoring pig at your feet. There's no separate feeding trough, no kibble, no special diets. What you eat, they eat, just with more snorting. It's a strange kind of companionship, built less on affection and more on shared resources. But in the quiet of a morning like this, as you watch Agnes lick the last of your stew from a bowl, it feels normal. Besides, you weren't that hungry anyway. As you sit cross-legged by the fire, scraping the last morsels of stew with your fingernail, it's easy to forget how much mealtime in the medieval world is tied to class, and how your breakfast says a lot about your place in the food chain. Not in the animal kingdom sense, though the goat is definitely eyeing your spoon, but in the strict social ladder that defines who gets what and when and how much of it, and how. For someone like you, a peasant, a tenant, a cog in the village wheel, breakfast is a question of leftovers, repetition, and resourcefulness. But just up the road, in the manor house, your lord is waking to something else entirely. Maybe fresh cheese, good ale, a roasted bird or two, and spices. Let's not forget spices, the elusive ingredients that could make your bland porridge taste like heaven if you ever got near them. Cinnamon, nutmeg, even pepper are imported goods, handled like treasure, measured out by the pinch. Most likely you'll never taste them in your lifetime. Food is the most basic form of status. The wealthy eat off of plates, wood, pewter, or even silver. You use trencher bread or your hands. They dine in courses. You eat in one humble heap. They sit in chairs. You perch on a stool, if you have one. Even the act of eating is different. Nobles are served, their meals announced by stewards and minstrels, while you're lucky if your brother doesn't steal your turn at the pot. Historians still discuss the extent to which these food gaps contributed to political unrest, or if people just accepted them as the natural order. What's clear is that meals reinforced social roles. You didn't just eat to survive, you ate to be reminded of your place. Still, there's something oddly cozy about it. Everyone's hungry, sure, but everyone's in it together. You pass a crust to your little sister, smile faintly at the sight of Agnes chewing on a turnip stub, and take comfort in the warmth of the fire. Today will be hard, but at least you started with something in your belly. Now that your belly's full of porridge and goat breath, it's time to get dressed, which sounds easier than it is. There are no zippers, no elastic waistbands, and absolutely no buttons. Buttons do exist, technically, but they're rare and mostly ornamental at this point in history. For people like you, dressing is all about layers, laces, and lots of awkward tugging. You start with the base layer, a linen shirt called a chemise or shift. It's long, scratchy, and smells faintly of smoke, sweat, and last week's stew. Underwear as we know it doesn't really exist yet, though some wealthier men wear a kind of baggy linen short called brays. You don't have those. You've got what nature gave you and a lot of hope that the wool trousers won't chafe too badly today. Next comes your tunic, the core of your wardrobe. It's made of thick wool, dyed a dull shade of brown or green depending on what plants were growing in the ditch when your grandmother brewed up the dye. It goes over your head with a bit of effort and gets belted at the waist with a bit of rope, leather, or braided wool, whatever you've got on hand. That belt? It holds up everything. Knife, pouch, maybe even a wooden spoon if you're lucky. There are no mirrors, so you can't see how disheveled you look. But it doesn't matter. Fashion for you is about not freezing to death and not tripping over your hem in the mud. Shoes are optional, depending on the season and how well your last pair held up. If you do have them, they're leather, stiff, and let in more water than they keep out. Historians often marvel at how cleverly medieval clothing was layered for warmth and practicality. But getting into it each day feels more like suiting up for battle than slipping into something comfortable. And as you lace your sleeves, again, no buttons, you wonder, will today be a day of labor or luck? Either way, you're dressed for neither. Once you're mostly dressed in your scratchy linen and lumpy wool, there's a lingering truth you just can't shake. Something's missing. Namely, underwear. For much of the medieval period, especially in the lower classes, the idea of undergarments was either non-existent or wildly impractical. You're walking around with layers of heavy cloth tied with bits of cord, and yet nothing in between. And in winter? That's a situation that feels more like a punishment than a fashion choice. Wealthier men wore those brays, essentially roomy linen shorts. But peasants like you might not have the fabric to spare. Fabric is precious. Every thread has value. If you own more than one shift or tunic, you're practically a fashion icon. The working poor made do with the bare minimum, literally, and often wore the same clothes day and night, for weeks. Yes, weeks. Women, depending on the region and period, may have layered multiple linen shifts beneath their gowns, but again, it depended on resources. There's no lace, no elastic, and absolutely no Victoria's Secret. Modesty is more about social rules than fabric coverage. If your shift stays in place and your gown doesn't ride up, you're good to go. If not, well, at least everyone else is equally disheveled. Some garments, like hose or chausses, were technically leg coverings, tied to a belt or doublet, but they offered little comfort and even less coverage where it mattered most. And for those who did wear layers underneath, let's just say laundry wasn't a frequent event. Washing clothes meant hauling water, boiling it, using harsh lye soap, and scrubbing everything on a board, then hoping for sun and dry air. It's no wonder most folks just aired things out and hoped for the best. Historians still puzzle over the exact prevalence of underclothes. Textiles rarely survive, and paintings don't exactly offer detailed underwear diagrams. What's clear is that comfort wasn't the goal, survival was. So as you tug your tunic down over bare legs and scratch at the wool that's already irritating your thighs, you wonder if going medieval was ever meant to be this literal. Now that you're dressed, if you can call this bundle of wool, sweat, and stubborn string dressed, you start to notice the subtle hierarchy woven into the very threads. Your tunic is brown, maybe grayish-green on a good day. That's not by choice, but because those are the colors that come from the plants and mud nearby. Real color, the rich reds, vibrant blues, and deep purples, are reserved for those with money, status, or ecclesiastical power. Dyeing cloth is a laborious, expensive task. Blue from woad takes days of fermenting leaves until they smell worse than the pigsty. Red comes from madder root or imported cochineal, pricey, precious, and way out of your league. Yellow's a bit more manageable, often drawn from weld or onion skins, but still, most folks can't afford the luxury of color. So the village ends up dressed like the world's most somber choir. The fabric itself is precious. Every scrap is saved, mended, or repurposed into something else. A patch, a belt, a rag for wiping spoons. Your outerwear might have pieces older than you are. That's not sentimentality, that's necessity. A good tunic is passed down through generations, which is why yours has elbows from a grown man and a neckline clearly made for someone half your size. Then there's the laundry. Oh, the laundry. There are no soap suds and sunshine montages here. Washing clothes means hauling gallons of water from a stream or well, heating it in iron pots over fire, scrubbing each item with lye made from ashes, and beating it against rocks. That's assuming the weather is good and the stream hasn't frozen. Most of the time, people opt to air out their clothes or shake them over a fire to kill off fleas and the occasional mouse. Historians agree that cleanliness standards were different, not absent. People didn't like being dirty. They just didn't have the tools or time to keep clean. So as you rub at a mysterious smudge on your sleeve, you realize this stain has probably lived more than you have. You adjust your belt for the third time this morning, trying to keep your tunic from riding up as you bend to lace your rough leather shoes. As you do, a neighbor passes by in the lane, his tunic slightly longer, dyed a dull blue and stitched just a little tighter. You notice everyone does. In the medieval world, what you wear isn't just about staying warm or dry. It's a billboard of your social status, and not just in a symbolic sense. There were actual laws about who could wear what. These were called sumptuary laws, and they were as nosy as they sound. Across medieval Europe, towns and kingdoms laid down rules, sometimes with real legal bite, about clothing. You couldn't just wear silk or velvet because you liked the feel of it. Those were fabrics for the nobility. Want to wear a flashy fur lining? You'd better have the title and tax receipts to back it up. Even shoe length was regulated at times. The longer the point of your shoe, the fancier you were. Which meant you. You were stuck with practical stubby boots, often held together with hope and leftover pig gut. These laws weren't just fashion police for the sake of snobbery. They were about maintaining social order. If everyone dressed the same, how would you know who to bow to? Historians still debate whether these laws were strictly enforced in rural areas. But even in your little village, the invisible line is clear. The manor steward wears finer wool. His cuffs are embroidered, the priest gets imported cloth, and you're just hoping your patched cloak makes it through another winter. Even hair and head coverings carry meaning. Married women cover their heads with coifs or veils. Apprentices wear caps that signal their trade. Children often wear mini versions of adult clothes. No bright colors, no frills, just function. A stranger can walk into your village and, with a glance, tell who owns land, who owes rent, and who's been wearing the same hose for 3 years straight. As you step outside and pull your hood up against the wind, you realize you're not just dressed, you're labeled. You're barely out the door when a smell wafts your way that immediately makes you question your decision to breathe. It's not the pigs, and it's not Agnes the goat. It's worse. Much worse. That, my friend, is the scent of the gong farmer, possibly the most underappreciated and definitely most avoided worker in the medieval village, and he's already started his rounds. The job? Cleaning out latrines, cesspits, and public privies. All the waste from your chamber pot, your neighbor's chamber pot, and the tavern's suspiciously overused outhouse. That's his domain. Gong is an old word for going, as in where people go, and he farms it. He digs, scrapes, and carts it away, usually under the cover of night, but sometimes in the early morning if he's backed up, which unfortunately he often is. You see him now, pushing a wooden wheelbarrow, thick with muck and buzzing with flies. He nods at you like it's just another Tuesday, because, for him, it is. You nod back, trying not to breathe through your nose. His clothes are caked in grime, his boots squelch with each step, and his gloves, if he's lucky enough to have them, are little more than stiff leather mitts that reek of fermented waste. Historians agree that this role was essential, especially in larger towns where overflowing cesspits could turn entire neighborhoods into disease traps. But no one wanted to do it. Gong farmers were paid surprisingly well for their efforts, but they were also socially exiled, literally living on the edges of towns, often forced to work under moonlight and remain anonymous. And don't even think about eating near one. Their presence could clear a dining hall faster than a rat in a stew pot. Still, someone had to do it. Without them, waste would pile up, infections would spread, and the already questionable air quality would become downright apocalyptic. So as you pass him and whisper a polite, "God save you," you find yourself strangely grateful, because it could be worse. You could be him. Just a few steps past the gong farmer's aromatic trail, you spot movement near the granary. Tiny, quick, and definitely unwanted. Rats. Again. One scurries across your path like it owns the place. It probably does. In a medieval village, rats and mice aren't just annoying. They're a serious threat, and people fear them with good reason. Grain is everything. It's your bread, your ale, your porridge. Lose your grain to rodents, and you're not just inconvenienced. You're hungry, your family's hungry, and your village is one step closer to a very long, very lean winter. That's why every home has traps, cats, and occasionally professional rat catchers. Yes, they existed, armed with little more than a sack, a stick, and unmatched patience. These unsung heroes were part pest control, part street performer. But rodents weren't just feared for eating your food. They were seen as omens, as disease bringers, even as witches' familiars. Superstition runs deep. Some folks hang charms or dried herbs near the floorboards. Others whisper Latin prayers when sweeping under the table. and everyone jumps when a squeak echoes in the night. Historians still debate how aware people were of the link between rats and plague. The Black Death, after all, didn't come with a footnote explaining bacterial transmission. But patterns were noticed. Rats appear, and people start dying. That's enough for the village gossip to declare them cursed. You remember when old Marta, the baker's aunt, insisted her goat got sick because a mouse ran over its tail. Did it make sense? No. Did anyone argue with her? Absolutely not. Better to nod and toss a pinch of salt over your shoulder. So as you walk carefully, avoiding the grain sacks near the mill, you make a mental note to check your own cottage tonight. The last thing you want is a rat's nest in the thatch roof, or worse, to find a chewed hole in your only good loaf. And remember, this is the same village where people still believe a sneeze can let demons in. Rats? They're not just pests. They're tiny, whiskered harbingers of doom. You keep walking toward the edge of the village, where mist curls low over a murky pond and reeds sway like whispering onlookers. There's a figure knee-deep in water, sleeves rolled up, trousers soaked and clinging to his legs. He's not fishing, he's not bathing, he's hunting for leeches. Yes, leeches, those slimy little vampires, are one of the most sought-after medical tools of the medieval age. You may be hauling wood, weaving baskets, or brewing ale, but this poor soul, he's a leech collector, and he's doing it for the health of others, or, more accurately, for the pocket change of others who think having their blood drained might fix their headache. He moves slowly, letting the leeches latch on naturally. It's the easiest way to gather them. Once they're full of blood and clinging to his skin, he carefully peels them off and drops them into a clay jar. From there, they'll be sold to barbers, apothecaries, and anyone desperate enough to think their bad humors need balancing. It's not glamorous work. The pond is cold, filled with algae and whatever else the animals upstream decided to donate. The risk of infection? High. The smell? Earthy, with notes of frog and damp sock. And yet, it's considered a form of healing, cutting-edge science even. Leech therapy fits neatly into the medieval obsession with humoral theory. If you're too hot or too dry, too full of phlegm or bile, the answer often involves bloodletting. And if the local barber surgeon can't spare the time or blades, then leeches are a tidy solution. Historians still argue how effective this practice really was. Some insist it caused more harm than good. Others point to cases where it may have reduced swelling or inflammation. Mostly, though, it just made people woozy and hopeful. You wave politely at the leech collector as he peels another one from his ankle. He waves back with a sheepish grin, a leech wriggling on the back of his hand like a living bracelet. And suddenly your job, whatever it is today, feels slightly more tolerable. As you continue down the well-trodden village path, dodging puddles of who knows what and nodding politely to a passing swineherd, it hits you. Nearly every job in this world involves something you'd rather not be doing. Poop. Risk, exposure, blisters. And if you're really unlucky, all of the above. There are no dream jobs in the medieval world, unless your dream involves hauling, cleaning, or being yelled at by someone slightly richer than you. Take the tanner, for instance. He works with leather, which sounds noble until you realize it starts with animal skins and a deep soak in a mixture of water, lime, and yes, dog feces. It's part of the process to loosen hair from the hide. He wades into vats of this stew daily, permanently surrounded by a bouquet that lingers longer than any medieval perfume ever could. People cross the road to avoid him, but they still need belts and shoes. Then there's the blacksmith, whose job involves hammers, molten metal, and a workshop so hot it could roast a pig, accidentally or on purpose. Every day he risks burns, smoke inhalation, and the occasional flying horseshoe. If he's lucky, he makes tools or nails. If he's really lucky, someone doesn't ask him to craft an iron chastity belt again. Yes, those existed. No, they weren't comfortable. Farmers, of course, get the worst of it. Endless hours in the fields, regardless of weather. bending, reaping, sowing, mucking stalls, dodging angry geese, and hoping the harvest comes in before blight or hail ruins everything. One bad season and you're not just out of work, you're out of food. Historians often point out how everyone worked in the Middle Ages, even children, and it's true. From shepherding to brewing, spinning to brewing again, life is labor. You work because you must, not because it's fulfilling. There's no passion project, no weekend hobby. Just the next task. So, as you head off to your own humble duties, whatever they may be, you offer a quiet nod to the dung collectors, leech gatherers, and goose chasers of the world. We're all just trying to get through the day. It's market day, which means your sleepy little village is transforming before your eyes. You step off the beaten track toward the town center, and the usual rhythm of clucking chickens, distant hammering, and the occasional moo has been replaced by something much louder, yelling, everywhere. Loud voices haggling, greeting, arguing over prices, accusing someone of watering down the ale. It's a chorus of daily survival, and you're right in the middle of it. The first thing that hits you is the smell, a glorious, pungent mixture of manure, dried fish, sweat, and something you can't quite identify. Sweet, sour, possibly both. Whatever it is, it clings to the air like a cloud that follows you from stall to stall. The ground is a disaster. It rained the night before, and the packed earth is now a sticky paste of mud and other less mentionable substances. Your shoes, or the laces pretending to be shoes, are already soaked. Somewhere to your right, a pig breaks loose and dashes through a pile of turnips. No one seems surprised. A boy gives chase, slips, and disappears with a squelch. People cheer. Market entertainment at its finest. You pass stalls piled with goods, rough-woven cloth, dented pewter cups, onions still speckled with dirt, eels wriggling in buckets, and baskets of eggs guarded by a woman with arms like rolling pins. Everyone is shouting at once. Sellers yell prices, buyers haggle, children whine, and someone's trying to tune a lute. It's not going well. Historians often describe markets as the heart of the medieval town, not just for commerce, but for gossip, news, and social theater. Everyone's here. Even the Lord's steward strolls through, flanked by guards, pretending not to notice a baker slipping him the nicest loaf. You wipe your hands on your cloak, already damp with morning mist and pig breath, and try not to trip over a goose wearing a bell. It's chaos. It's muddy, it's loud, and somehow it's also the highlight of your week. You push your way toward the row of food stalls, dodging a stray dog with a cabbage in its mouth and a man balancing live ducks in a basket. The smell hits you before the sight does. Fish. Not the sea breeze kind either. It's the smell of river catch that's been out too long in the morning sun. Still, fish is fish, and you might be able to afford one, if you're lucky, charming, and have thick skin for a bit of haggling. At the fishmonger's stall, eels writhe in a shallow wooden tub, their slick bodies glinting in the light like wet bootlaces. Next to them lies a pile of small, flat fish that look suspicious. Gills tinged brown, eyes cloudy, a couple with scales that seem to be migrating off entirely. But the seller beams at you with all the enthusiasm of someone who's about to pretend this fish isn't 3 days past its prime. He names a price that could feed a family for a week. You laugh, not a friendly laugh, a competitive one. Haggling is expected here, not optional. You counter with something insulting. He clutches his chest like you've wounded him, then offers 2 for the price of 1 if you take the ugliest. You inspect it. The smell suggests it already lived a long, stressful life. This dance continues. Other buyers elbow in, pointing at shrimp that may have once twitched, but now look more like jerky. A woman next to you snags a decent carp and whispers that she'll stew it with wild garlic, if the priest doesn't smell it and ask where she got it. Historians note that in inland villages, fresh fish was a treat and a challenge. Without refrigeration, everything turned fast, and sellers often used wine, herbs, or flat-out lies to make things seem more appetizing. The church required fish on Fridays, which only added pressure. Finally, you reach a compromise, a questionable trout and a handful of limp herbs for just enough coin to leave you broke but fed. Bon appetit. Just chew carefully, and try not to smell it too hard. With your less than fresh fish wrapped in a scrap of cloth, you head toward the next stall to pick up some onions, assuming your remaining funds can handle it. But funds, in your world, don't always mean coins. In fact, coins are rare enough that when someone drops one in the mud, half the market stalls empty out in a communal treasure hunt. Most trade in your village happens through barter. You might swap a dozen eggs for a bundle of firewood, or trade a patch of homespun wool for a small pot of honey. It's a system built on relationships, reputation, and the fine art of pretending your turnips are definitely worth more than someone's tired cheese. If you're lucky, the other person agrees. If not, you smile, mutter something vaguely threatening in Latin, even if you don't speak Latin, and walk away. When coins are used, they come in an eclectic mix. Silver pennies, clipped farthings, maybe even a foreign coin from someone who traveled far enough to pick one up and still somehow ended up back here. Weights and scales are used when trust runs thin. But more often, a crooked smile and a firm handshake are the medieval equivalent of buyer protection. You reach into your pouch and pull out your wealth. 3 copper tokens, a bit of dyed thread, and a chicken feather that got in there somehow. You consider offering the thread. It's strong, colorful, and someone might need it for mending a cloak, or reinforcing the hem of a goat's winter coat. Stranger trades have happened. Historians still argue about the exact systems of barter in rural towns like yours. Some suggest it functioned flawlessly. Others point to complaints about cheating and spoiled goods. Likely, it was both, fluid, messy, and based entirely on whether the baker likes your aunt or thinks you stepped on his cabbage last week. You managed to trade the trout and some kindling for 3 onions and a bruised apple. Not bad. Your pouch is lighter, but your bag is heavier, and that's how you measure wealth around here. With your shopping mostly done, onions in your basket, fish tucked away, and the faint but growing feeling you've been overcharged, you drift toward the heart of the square. The crowd's thickening now, clustering around a troupe of street performers. You pause, half curious, half needing a break from the yelling, the smells, and the mud attempting to claim your shoes like a slow-motion trap. A man in tights juggles apples, one of which still has a bite taken out of it. A woman spins and twirls with colored scarves that look like they might once have been bedsheets. A lute player strums in the background, tuning as he goes, mostly hitting notes, but not always in the right order. Kids cheer. A drunk man claps off beat. It's glorious chaos. The performer calls for a volunteer. You immediately step back, remembering what happened to the last guy. They turned his hat into a puppet, and he's still red-faced an hour later. But as you laugh, distracted by a clever rhyme involving a sheep and a wheelbarrow, something else happens. Something quieter. Your pouch. The one with the last copper coin and a bit of thread? It's gone. You freeze. You check your belt, then your pockets, then the ground. Nothing. You scan the crowd, eyes darting between strangers, suspicious of anyone walking too quickly or not clapping with the beat. The juggler throws another apple. The lute player misses a chord. Somewhere, a pickpocket melts into the crowd with your modest wealth, likely chuckling to himself and heading straight for the ale stall. Pickpockets are the quiet predators of the marketplace. Historians note how common they were in towns and cities, often working in pairs, one to distract, another to lift the goods. Punishment, if caught, could be public shaming or worse, but that doesn't stop them. Everyone knows someone who's been picked. Today, it's you. You sigh. At least they didn't take the onions, and honestly, the thread wasn't that valuable. Still, as the crowd erupts in laughter and the juggler takes a dramatic bow, you tighten what remains of your pouch and mutter, "Next time I'm wearing it inside my shirt." Just as you escape the pickpocket's playground and start down the lane toward home, a low, heavy gong rolls through the air, then another and another. You pause, eyes half-lidded, already knowing what it means. It's the church bell again. It rings for everything: sunrise, prayer times, meal times, vespers, even funerals. Sometimes it tolls just to remind you that yes, time is passing, and yes, you still owe rent. In a world without wristwatches, phone alarms, or buzzing microwave timers, church bells are the heartbeat of the day. They echo across fields, bounce off rooftops, and stir even the sleepiest goat from its nap. If you live anywhere near the church tower, and in a village this size everyone basically does, your life is organized not by hours, but by sound. You wake to bells. You work to bells. You eat, pray, and sleep when the bell says it's time. You glance toward the squat stone chapel at the village center. The bell tower leans slightly, like it's tired of its own noise, but still does its duty. A young boy tugs the rope from below, red-faced and determined. You've seen him lose his grip once and get yanked a full foot off the ground. He rang for 15 seconds longer than scheduled that day, but no one complained. Each bell has meaning. A slow, single toll means someone's passed. A faster rhythm signals a wedding or a fire. And during feast days, that bell rings so much it practically vibrates. If you miss the bell, you miss the moment. No second chances, no calendar alerts. Historians say that bells weren't just timekeepers, they were spiritual anchors. Their sound was believed to ward off evil spirits, storms, even plague. When thunder cracked or illness spread, villagers begged the priest to ring it louder, as if sound alone might shield them. So, as you trudge home, the bell's still echoing in your ears, you sigh softly. Another chunk of your day measured in bronze and air. And as always, no matter what you were doing, the bell wins. The bell has barely finished its final echo when you spot him. Brother Alwyn, robes flapping in the wind, eyebrows raised like he already knows what you're guilty of. You try to look busy, eyes on the ground, hands adjusting your already adjusted belt. It doesn't matter, he sees you, he always does. Child, he says, even though you're about 3 winters younger than he is, when did you last confess? You smile, weakly. Not long ago, you mumble, which could mean last week or last harvest. He frowns, folds his arms, and gestures toward the chapel with the slow inevitability of a man who's already rearranged his schedule to accommodate your sins. Confession is a regular part of village life, and it's expected, not just as a formality, but as a kind of spiritual hygiene. The idea is to cleanse your soul of whatever offenses have built up since your last visit. Impure thoughts, gossip, working on a holy day, or in your case, mildly wanting to shove Brother Alwyn into a muddy ditch. The inside of the chapel is cool, dim, and filled with the smell of beeswax and damp stone. You kneel at the wooden rail, and he sits across from you, ready to hear your darkest missteps. You start with something small, forgetting to pray before a meal. He nods. You move on to a half-truth told at the market. He arches an eyebrow. Finally, you mention that you may have, accidentally, envied your neighbor's sturdier boots. That gets a full sigh. He assigns your penance: 5 Hail Marys, a psalm recited before bed, and a promise to return before the month is out. You nod. It's not so bad. Last time he made you help clean the altar cloths, while he watched. Historians note that confession served not only a religious function but also a social one. Priests knew everything, and a nosy friar like Brother Alwyn, he's both shepherd and village newsletter. You step back into the sunlight, feeling not exactly cleansed, but at least off the hook, for now. And you can't help but wonder, does Brother Alwyn confess to anyone? As you walk past the church's heavy wooden doors, you pause to glance back at the inside wall above the nave. There it is. The Doom Painting, a massive, terrifying mural showing the Last Judgment in vivid detail. It's the medieval equivalent of a horror film poster, only this one's been staring you down since childhood. On the left, the blessed rise from their graves, glowing and graceful, led toward heaven by helpful angels with golden trumpets. On the right, fire. Chaos, tiny demons with grotesque faces gleefully dragging sinners down into the gaping jaws of hell, which, for some reason, always looks like a giant fanged fish. You squint at the figures. One man is being roasted on a spit, probably a baker who watered down his ale. Another is being chased by a pig in armor. You don't even want to know what that symbolizes. These paintings are meant to teach the illiterate masses about salvation and sin, but really, they just scare you into behaving. The message is clear. Don't gossip, don't skip church, and absolutely don't steal onions. Because God sees everything, and he apparently has a passion for theatrical punishment. Historians still debate how much these images genuinely shaped behavior versus simply reflecting existing fears. But one thing is certain: they were unforgettable. Bright colors, wild imagery, and dramatic gestures ensured the message stuck with you long after the sermon ended. You remember once hearing that a rival village had their doom painting whitewashed because it was too terrifying for the children. Yours. It gets touched up with care every generation. Priorities. You tug your cloak tighter around your shoulders and move on, slightly more cautious, slightly more convinced that your thoughts might land you on the wrong side of that fishmouth hellgate. Guilt, you realize, is the one thing in this village that never runs out. Just beyond the chapel, nestled in a niche under a carved stone arch, is the village's greatest treasure, a bone. Not just any bone, according to the priest. It's the finger of St. Ethelbert, the slightly unyielding. It's kept in a glass case, which might actually be old lamp glass, and pilgrims passing through are encouraged to kiss it, or at least glance at it admiringly for good luck. Relics like this are everywhere in the medieval world. Pieces of saints, bones, teeth, scraps of robe, even toenails, are scattered across Europe like divine confetti. Each one comes with a story. Healed a blind man, cured the pox, stopped a flood. No one really questions how one saint can have 12 skulls and 7 left feet in various cities. The faithful don't ask. They kneel, they pray, they hope. Your village believes the finger relic cures headaches. It doesn't. You tried it last week, but still you touched it gently, murmured your request, and gave your offering. A chicken feather and a coin you suspect was once part of a game token. It was all you had. The priest accepted it solemnly, then subtly dropped the feather into the fire behind him. Miracle cures don't stop there. There's also the well in the woods, blessed by a traveling monk who sneezed 3 times and declared it sacred. People still dunk their babies in it. And don't forget the woman down the lane who claims her cat sits only on the sick and can smell death. She's become something of a village thermometer. If the cat curls up beside you, people start planning your funeral. Historians note that relics and miracle beliefs offered emotional comfort in an age where medicine was more guesswork than science. They filled a void and gave hope where there often wasn't any. You glance at the finger relic as you pass. It's smaller than you remember. Maybe it's a knuckle, maybe it's a chicken bone. Either way, it's all you've got. And maybe, just maybe, it still works. As midday draws near, the marketplace slowly begins to shift. The haggling grows quieter, the goats wander off in search of shade, and a subtle new smell wafts through the air, warm, rich, and just this side of suspicious. It's feast time. And today, there's a cause for celebration. The harvest was decent. A nearby lord's cousin got married, or perhaps someone simply found a pig that didn't belong to them. Either way, a feast is declared, and food is being brought out in abundance, or at least by medieval standards. At the center of the long wooden table stands the crown jewel of this banquet, a giant meat pie. Its crust is golden, flaking slightly at the edges, and steam curls up from a crack near the top. It's huge, probably baked in a communal oven, big enough to roast your neighbor. People gather around, clutching trenchers, stale slices of bread that double as plates and later as pig food, and eagerly await the first slice. You eye the pie cautiously. In theory, it should contain meat, pork, maybe chicken, possibly venison if someone's been poaching in the Lord's forest. Don't ask, don't tell. In practice, it could be anything. Could. Pigeon, rabbit, a bit of eel if the fishmonger got creative. The pie is the medieval answer to what's in the fridge. Only the fridge is a basket of leftovers and whatever didn't go bad overnight. One slice in and you spot something wobbly, jelly. Gravy? Collagen? The mystery is part of the magic. And while it may not be seasoned well, it's hot, filling, and, miraculously, meat-based. That alone makes it a luxury. Historians note that meat pies were not just culinary staples, but also symbols of status. The larger and more elaborately decorated the crust, the higher the rank of the person who ordered it. Yours is plain, with a single crimped edge that may have been made by a child, or a very distracted baker. Still, as you tuck in, ignoring the suspiciously chewy bit you just bit into, you sigh in contentment. For now at least you eat like a king, or a well-fed stable boy. The feast is in full swing now. Trenchers are stacked, ale is flowing, and the table sounds like a barnyard with better tablecloths. But if you're imagining fine cutlery, polite murmurs, and linen napkins, you may want to reset your expectations. Medieval dining is enthusiastic, messy, and, for the faint of heart, a bit unsettling. You sit elbow to elbow with neighbors, some of whom are already 3 cups of ale ahead of you. There's a communal bowl of stew in the center, and folks dip their spoons directly into it, sometimes after licking them clean, sometimes not. People speak with their mouths full, shout across the table, and wipe greasy fingers on anything available. Beards, sleeves, the nearest dog. One guy near you is eating with such gusto that he accidentally flings a pea at the priest. There's no such thing as personal space. One person's chicken bone becomes a dog's treat 2 seconds later, tossed over the shoulder with practiced flair. Spitting is common. If something tastes off, people just spit it out onto the floor, where straw or rushes are meant to soak it up, along with everything else that ends up down there. It's a feast for the stomach and for the mice. Manners do exist in theory. You're not supposed to reach across someone's plate, and it's considered rude to hoard the best cuts of meat, though this rule is frequently ignored. If someone offers you something from their trencher, you're expected to accept. Refusing could be taken as an insult, especially if they're higher status. Historians remind us that medieval etiquette manuals did exist. They warned against scratching fleas at the table, blowing your nose on the tablecloth, or belching too loudly, though most of these warnings were evidently aspirational. As you nibble your way through a leg of something you decide not to ask, you dodge a flying plum pit and nod politely to the man picking breadcrumbs out of his beard beside you. Feasting, like everything else here, is a group effort. Just don't look too closely at your neighbor's hands. As the feast continues, you start to notice a pattern, not just in the seating arrangements, but in the food distribution. The good stuff, tender meat, fat portions, dishes seasoned with anything more exciting than salt, tends to migrate in one direction, toward the high table. Up there, under the colorful banner and with slightly less mud on their boots, sit the steward, the reeve, and a few of the manners in a circle. They're slicing into a roast that looks suspiciously like it came from the Lord's private stock. You, however, are working on what might be a chicken wing or possibly an overcooked frog leg. The outer tables, where you sit, get what's left once the fancy cuts are taken. Gristly meat, bread heels, and that mysterious pottage that's more root than flavor. In this world, food is not just nutrition, it's status. Even at shared meals, hierarchy is as visible as the grease stains on your tunic. The closer you sit to power, the richer your plate. There's a pecking order, and you are decidedly not the rooster. You glance up at the high table. They're laughing, sipping spiced wine, and pretending not to notice that someone just refilled their cups before you've had your first. You pick at your meat, trying to find a bite that doesn't require dental acrobatics. Historians often point to these feasts as examples of structured inequality. Even when the entire village eats together, the divisions are visible, carved into roasts and doled out by serving spoons. Food reinforces your place in the social order, just in case the patched knees of your trousers didn't already make it clear. Still, there's something comforting in the chaos. Everyone gets something, and on feast day, even gristly meat tastes better when the fire's warm, the ale flows, and there's music in the air. You chew thoughtfully, dodging a bone tossed too enthusiastically by someone on your left, and mutter, "Maybe next year I'll sit closer." Though, let's be honest, you won't. You've just about given up on your mystery meat when a new wave of excitement ripples down the table. A procession begins. 2 servants carry in something massive and smoking, flanked by a third playing a tiny pipe with great seriousness. It's a whole roasted boar, snout still intact, mouth propped open with an apple, tusks glinting in the torchlight. A cheer goes up, and someone near you starts clapping with greasy hands. The boar is set before the high table like a prize. No one touches it for a while, partly because it's ceremonial, partly because they're still trying to remember who gets the first cut. Eventually, the steward carves off a slice, dripping with fat, and begins distributing it, slowly, deliberately, and mostly to his own table. Meanwhile, music fills the air. A group of minstrels has arrived, dressed in clashing colors and slightly out of tune. One plays a lute, another beats a drum that sounds suspiciously like an overturned bucket, and the third sings in a nasal falsetto that only the drunkest guests seem to appreciate. Still, the effect is magical, at least until the jester tumbles into the firewood stack during a cartwheel attempt. Then comes the pièce de résistance, the bird pie. You've heard tales of it, but seeing it in person is something else. A huge pastry is wheeled in, golden brown, steaming, and moving. For a moment, you worry. Then, with a dramatic gesture, someone slices open the crust, and out fly 3 live sparrows fluttering madly toward the rafters, while guests duck and cheer. It's absurd. It's unsanitary. It's theater, and it's the most entertainment you've had all season. Historians believe such spectacles were more common among the nobility, but even in small villages, people tried to imitate grandeur. Feasts weren't just about food. They were about showing off, telling stories, and reminding everyone of the line between the mundane and the magical. You lean back, full enough, warm from the fire, watching the sparrows disappear into the thatch roof. For a brief moment, life feels a little less like survival. The morning after the feast dawns foggy and slow. Your head is heavy, your boots still muddy, and there's only one thing that might make you feel remotely human again. Ale. Not the fancy kind served in pewter mugs at the manor, but good, honest village ale, made in a barrel behind your neighbor's cottage by his wife, who has a reputation for brewing that would put most taverns to shame. In this world, brewing isn't a man's job. It belongs almost entirely to women. Brewsters, they're called, alewives if married, and they turn grain and water into something that keeps villages upright, hydrated, and in reasonably cheerful spirits. It's not glamorous. It's hot, heavy work. You stir the mash with a paddle almost as tall as yourself, watching the grains bubble like a swamp on a good day. Herbs like bog myrtle or yarrow are tossed in. Hops haven't quite taken over yet, and the smell is earthy, slightly sour, and oddly comforting. The fermentation process is half science, half sorcery. A successful batch means celebration. A bad one? The neighborhood will let you know. You help carry buckets of ale to the common, careful not to spill. Everyone gathers their ration, young, old, even children. It's not about getting drunk, though that happens too. The water's not always safe to drink, but ale, boiled and fermented, is reliable. Besides, it gives people something to talk about. Historians note that women brewers wielded quiet power in their communities. A respected alewife could earn money, trade, and social status. Some even branded their mugs with symbols or patterns like medieval business cards. Of course, as towns grew and brewing became profitable, men tried to edge in and take over. But here, today, the best ale still comes from behind that crooked shed, stirred by hands that know just when the foam is right. You take a deep sip, feeling the warmth spread. It's not just a drink, it's proof that in a hard, cold world, women keep the fires lit and the spirits strong. Beside the cottage, in a patch of carefully tended soil, grows something even more powerful than ale. Herbs. Rows of sage, marjoram, and mugwort stretch out beneath the morning mist, each one a quiet guardian against illness, pain, and bad luck. The village healer, an older woman everyone calls simply Nan, kneels in the dirt, hands stained green from crushing leaves, her apron already damp with dew. Nan knows her plants like a minstrel knows his songs. For a cough, it's thyme in warm ale. For cramps, a poultice of chamomile and nettle. For nightmares, a sachet of lavender under the pillow and a whispered prayer. She learned this knowledge from her mother, who learned it from hers. No books, no scrolls, just years of observation, intuition, and the occasional risky experiment. You help her gather wild comfrey from the edge of the woods, avoiding the nettles and the damp, boggy patches where frogs leap at your ankles. Back at her table, she boils roots in an iron pot, muttering about the humors and moon cycles. It all feels like magic, but it's medicine. Centuries of folk knowledge passed down hand to hand. Historians now recognize how advanced some of these remedies were. While physicians in cities bled patients or fed them crushed pearls, village healers used antiseptic plants, balanced diets, and treatments that genuinely helped, but they walked a fine line. Too much success, and people whispered, "Witch." Too little, and they were ignored. Still, most villagers trusted the woman with the herb garden more than any passing surgeon. You watch as Nan ties a bundle of yarrow with a twist of dyed wool, handing it to you for your cousin's fever. "Steep it in water, not ale," she warns, wagging a finger. And just like that, you leave with hope in your hands and the scent of rosemary in your sleeves. You return home with the herbs tucked safely in your pouch, just in time to see your older sister at the doorway, spindle in hand, twisting wool into thread like she's done every day since she could hold one. Her foot taps out a rhythm, her fingers pull and twist, and the spindle twirls steadily, as if powered by sheer determination. This is the soundtrack of a medieval household, quiet, constant labor. Inside, the room smells of drying herbs, leftover stew, and the faint burn of overboiled linens. Your mother is hunched over a tunic, mending a hole with thread that doesn't quite match. Nobody cares. Clothes are meant to last, sometimes for generations, and a well-mended elbow is a badge of competence. Somewhere in the corner, a younger cousin is stirring the fire, while a pot of water simmers, maybe for tea, maybe for dyeing yarn, maybe for scrubbing lice out of a blanket. It's all in a day's work. A medieval woman runs her home like a tight ship, with one hand churning butter and the other managing who gets the next wash basin. She brews, cooks, knits, mends, teaches, barters, and still finds time to make sure you washed behind your ears. Everything has to be reused, recycled, resewn. There's no waste here, just layers of purpose. Historians note that the economic backbone of the medieval household was largely female. While men toiled in fields or workshops, women ran the day-to-day infrastructure that kept everyone alive. Their work wasn't flashy, but it was relentless and essential. Spinning alone consumed hours each week. A single tunic might require miles of thread, and every inch came from those spindles, turning day after day. You sit beside your sister, take a turn at carding wool, and listen to the gentle whir of the spindle. It's oddly soothing, like a heartbeat for the home. Out the window, the world continues. Children chase chickens, Someone yells about a missing pie, and the clouds hint at rain. But here, in this moment, the household hums quietly on, kept whole by nimble fingers and endless patience. Of course, not every woman in the village spins wool and minds the stew pot. Some, like Nan, delve deeper into the world of healing, learning how to coax life from leaves, mend broken bones with splints made of ashwood, and read the weather by how bees move across the fields. Over time, women like her gain reputations. Respect, yes, but also whispers. Nan's been called many things: wise woman, midwife, healer, and sometimes behind cupped hands, witch. You've seen her perform what some would call miracles. She once brought a fevered baby back from the brink using only willow bark tea and a cooling cloth. She set a broken arm so perfectly that even the steward's son gave her thanks and coin. But the moment things go wrong, the mood can shift. Last spring, a girl caught a sudden fever after visiting Nan's hut. Some said it was fate. Others muttered that maybe Nan had gotten too powerful. Being a healer in this world is a balancing act between necessity and suspicion. Everyone needs you until they don't. Herbs are fine when brewed in a teacup, but boil them in a copper pot under a full moon, and suddenly the priest wants a word. Historians continue to debate whether medieval witch trials were more about misogyny, fear, or simple superstition. Most likely, it was all three. Still, Nan knows how to walk that line. She keeps a crucifix above her hearth and attends church twice a week. She blesses her salves and avoids speaking Latin unless quoting scripture. Even so, she keeps a protective charm buried under her doorstep, just in case. You wonder, watching her crush dried roots with the side of a knife, what it must feel like to know so much, and yet have to hide half of it. She catches your glance and smiles. "It's not magic," she says softly. "Just knowing when to listen, and when to keep your mouth shut." The fire crackles. Outside, an owl hoots, early. Inside, she continues stirring, quietly keeping the village from unraveling. You're trying to enjoy a quiet moment beside the hearth, sipping a warm cup of watered ale, when a sudden jolt stabs through your jaw. It's your tooth, again. That same one in the back that's been bothering you since the last frost. You press your tongue against it. Bad idea. The pain shoots straight through your skull like a lightning bolt made of vinegar and regret. Dental care in the medieval world is, shall we say, minimal. There are no toothbrushes in the modern sense, no dentists in the cheerful smile and gentle hand sense. You've got options, but none of them are good. The first and most common remedy is prayer. You mumble a desperate plea to St. Apollonia, patroness of toothaches, whose own teeth were famously yanked out during martyrdom. Her icon hangs on the chapel wall, holding a pair of pliers with saintly composure. You, however, are less composed. If prayer doesn't help, and it usually doesn't, then it's time for more earthy solutions. You remember Nan's recipe. Mash garlic and sage into a paste, apply it directly to the gums, and bite down. It burns. That's how you know it's working or not. Some folks swear by clove oil, others chew on willow bark. A few, with more confidence than sense, have tried rinsing with strong vinegar, believing pain is best fought with more pain. Historians say that many medieval people lived with chronic dental problems, enduring discomfort until things became unbearable, and when they did, that's when things got truly medieval. You spit into the fire and glance around the room. Someone suggests heating a knife and pressing it to the gum to kill the root. Another recommends a charm involving bat wings and moonlight. You opt for another sip of ale instead. Toothaches were a constant, a reminder of your body's frailty and the limits of the time. But you endure, because what else can you do? The pain will fade, eventually, or the tooth will fall out. Either way, problem solved. You lean back, eyes half closed, and mutter, "Maybe if I just stop chewing on that side forever." Eventually, the toothache becomes unbearable. You've tried prayers, herbs, and even the mysterious batwing charm. Nothing has worked. There's only one option left, one you've been dreading for days, the barber surgeon. He's not a dentist, though he owns pliers. He's also not a barber in the modern sense, though he'll gladly cut your hair, usually with the same knife he uses to lance boils. In medieval towns, barber surgeons are the multitaskers of pain. They pull teeth, set bones, bloodlet, and trim beards, all from the same rickety chair in the corner of a tavern or a stall near the market. You find him under a faded red and white striped pole, sharpening his tools with a humming tune that doesn't inspire confidence. His instruments are laid out on a wooden table like a collection of medieval torture devices, curved knives, thick needles, a saw, you hope it's not for you, and the infamous tooth key, an iron contraption that looks like it was designed by someone who hated smiling. You sit down, heart pounding. He smiles, his teeth are perfect. This feels unfair. There's no anesthesia, no numbing cream, no gentle music playing in the background. Just a rag to bite and two men to hold your shoulders down. He mutters something about the roots being tricky, and then, with a grunt, jams the tool into your mouth and twists. The pressure is immediate. Then the crack. Then white-hot pain that makes you momentarily forget your name. The crowd watching winces in unison. Someone claps when it's over. The barber holds up the tooth with a flourish, inspecting it like a fisherman admiring a fresh catch. "You'll sleep better now," he says, wiping your blood on his apron. You try to nod and nearly faint. Historians still marvel at how common these procedures were, and how often they worked, despite the risk of infection, broken jaws, or pulling the wrong tooth. But without options, people chose pain over decay. You stagger home, clutching your jaw. The pain is different now, sharper, but somehow cleaner. And maybe, just maybe, you'll finally get some rest. A few days pass, and while your jaw still throbs with the memory of that barbaric tooth extraction, you start to wonder, could this have been avoided? Probably not. But it does make you think about what passes for dental hygiene around here, and it's about as rustic as everything else. In place of toothbrushes, you and your neighbors use chew sticks, thin twigs from trees like birch, willow, or hazel. You peel the bark, chew one end until it frays into bristles, and then rub it across your teeth in slow circular motions. It's simple, quiet, and surprisingly effective, assuming you do it regularly and don't lose the twig in the fireplace. Some households dip the twigs in salt, crushed herbs, or even ash to give them a little extra cleaning power. The taste is bitter, gritty, and oddly comforting if you've grown up with it. You keep one tucked behind your ear or tied to your belt with a loop of string. It's not just a tool, it's part of your daily rhythm. Tooth powders exist too, if you're fancy. Made from ground eggshells, mint, or burnt bread, these are stored in little clay pots and used sparingly. One woman in the village swears by a mixture of powdered sage and soot. Another chews licorice root, not for flavor, but because she insists it keeps her breath fresh. The jury's out. Historians say that while dental hygiene was far from standardized, many medieval people were surprisingly attentive to their teeth, especially compared to popular assumptions. Skeletons from the era sometimes show less decay than expected, possibly due to a diet low in sugar and high in coarse grains that naturally scrub the teeth. Still, nothing lasts forever. You run your tongue along the gap where your molar used to be and sigh. Maybe the chew stick helped, maybe it didn't. You reach for a new twig, peel it carefully, and begin again. In a world where medicine is questionable and surgery is traumatic, your best defense is prevention, and a stick you found near the goat pen. You're sitting by the hearth again, gently working your latest chew stick across your remaining teeth, when the local miller strolls in and begins a lively conversation about worms. Not the kind in your garden, but the kind, he says, that live inside your teeth. According to him, and frankly most people around you, these little monsters burrow in, cause pain, and feast on whatever scraps you didn't pick out with your twig. Sounds ridiculous, right? Except, in the medieval mind, it makes perfect sense. The idea of the toothworm wasn't just local gossip, it was accepted medical theory across many regions for centuries. People believed that cavities and toothaches were caused by these tiny creatures gnawing away at your enamel from the inside out. No one had microscopes, after all. What else could explain sudden, sharp pain from within a solid bone? The proof. Occasionally people claimed to see the worms. Most likely they saw tendon fibers or were extremely imaginative. Either way, the idea stuck. Remedies ranged from herbal salves to bizarre rituals. One method involved heating a metal needle, inserting it near the aching tooth, and hoping the worm fled from the heat. Another? Smoking the worm out, literally, by holding burning herbs close to your open mouth. Historians today can trace the myth of toothworms back to ancient Babylon and beyond. The theory persisted through medieval Europe and into the Renaissance. It wasn't until the 18th century, when microscopes revealed bacteria and plaque, that the worm idea finally began to fade. But in your time, that knowledge doesn't exist. So when you wince at a twinge in your jaw, people nod knowingly. A worm, someone says, as if it's obvious. Best have it smoked out before winter sets in. You nod, not entirely convinced, and make a mental note to ask Nan if she has any anti-worm salve. Meanwhile, you sip your tepid ale and try to remember the last time you ate anything sweet enough to attract a worm in the first place. Spoiler, it was probably that single dried fig 3 winters ago. You're wandering back through the village square after another long day, your jaw finally quieting down, when you spot a crowd forming near the church steps. They're not gathered for a sermon or a festival this time. They're pointing and chuckling, some tossing the occasional crust of bread or shout. In the middle of it all sits the pillory, and in it your neighbor Thomas, arms and head locked in place, expression sour, face streaked with the remains of what was probably once a turnip. You can't help but wince. The pillory and stocks are as common in your world as firewood and fleas. They're the medieval version of time out, public shaming devices designed to punish the minor, but still annoying offenses that drive villagers mad. Cheating at weights, insulting the reeve, stealing eggs, or skipping mass one too many times. No jail cells, no court dates. Just a platform, a locking mechanism, and a whole lot of humiliation. Thomas, according to the whispers, was caught watering down ale again. It's not the crime that surprises anyone, it's the fact he got caught. So now he's on display. And you can bet the kids are already planning what vegetables to throw next. These punishments weren't meant to draw blood, just attention. The stocks kept your feet bound, while the pillory held your head and hands in a most undignified way. Your limbs go numb, your back aches, and your pride. That gets trampled almost immediately. People heckle. They bring jokes. Someone might even paint your nose blue, just for sport. Historians explain that public punishment like this served as a strong deterrent. It reinforced communal norms by turning crime into spectacle. But they also note it could go too far, some victims left with injuries, especially if the crowd got carried away. You meet Thomas's eyes for a second. He tries to glare, but a piece of onion skin slides down his cheek. You nod politely and walk on. You'd laugh too, if it weren't so easy to imagine yourself in that spot. One bad deal, one sharp word, and you could be next. Just when you think you've seen everything your village has to offer in terms of strange justice, you hear the bell ring again, this time not for prayer, but for court. You follow the crowd to the chapel yard, where benches have been hastily set up, and a clerk nervously flips through a few scraps of parchment. The judge looks exhausted, the priest looks vaguely amused, and the defendant is a pig. Not a person accused of being a pig, a literal pig. 4 legs, muddy snout, and what appears to be a bit of lettuce still stuck to its ear. The crime, rooting through the steward's herb garden and willful destruction of property. There's also a vague suggestion of threatening behavior, though that part remains unconfirmed. You shift to the side for a better view.
This isn't even the first time this has happened. Last year, a rooster was accused of laying an egg, which apparently raised enough suspicion of witchcraft to warrant a full investigation. And you'll never forget the time someone swore a goat was possessed after it bit the baker's apprentice. That trial ended in a hung verdict. The goat was acquitted, the apprentice less so. The pig today stands remarkably still, which only makes the scene more absurd. A bailiff reads the charges aloud. The judge solemnly asks if the animal has representation. Sometimes a real advocate is brought in, a local scribe or clerk to speak on behalf of the accused. Today, the pig gets no such luxury. Historians confirm that animal trials were very real across medieval Europe. Pigs, dogs, even insects were brought before local courts, sometimes sentenced to death, sometimes excommunicated. These trials might sound ridiculous now, but at the time, they reflected a worldview in which animals, like humans, were seen as moral actors capable of sin, or at least inconvenience. After a brief deliberation and a few chuckles from the back, the pig is declared guilty. The sentence, confiscation, and a strong warning to the swineherd. The pig, blissfully unaware, snorts and wanders off, probably looking for more herbs to ruin. Justice, it seems, has been served. The pig may be off the hook, or more accurately, the roasting spit. But not every trial ends with a muddy snort and a shrug. Some take a far more dramatic turn. You've heard whispers, of course, and today you finally witness one of the more intense forms of medieval justice, trial by ordeal. It starts with a solemn procession, a hush among the villagers, and the accused, this time a young man from the neighboring hamlet, standing barefoot and pale beside the parish priest. No one's exactly sure what he did, but the phrase "stolen relic" was muttered more than once. Whether true or not, the court has decided it's time for divine intervention. Trial by ordeal is based on one simple, terrifying belief. God knows the truth, and he'll show it in unmistakable fashion. The method varies. There's ordeal by fire, where the accused must carry a red-hot iron bar a set number of paces. The wound is then bandaged, and if it heals cleanly after a few days, innocence is declared. Infection. That's a guilty conscience made flesh. Then there's ordeal by water. This one's trickier. You're tied up and tossed into a pond. If you sink, you're innocent, because the pure element of water has accepted you. If you float, well, that means you've been rejected. And also, you're guilty. It's a win-lose-lose situation. Today's ordeal is the less common, more peculiar ordeal by consecrated food, sometimes nicknamed the cake test. A piece of holy bread is placed in the accused's mouth. He's asked to swallow it while declaring his innocence. If he chokes or gags, it's taken as proof of a lie. You're not sure how divine that is, but you've seen worse medical logic. Historians still debate how often these ordeals were used versus simply threatened. Some records suggest local clergy preferred to settle matters quietly with confession or compensation. Others show that entire communities turned out for these events, part theater, part terror, part Sunday outing. The young man swallows. No gag, a breathless silence. The priest nods. Innocent. For now. But in this village, you're never more than one misunderstanding away from your own dance with fire, water, or cake. With the trial over and the crowd dispersing, you make your way past the green toward the riverbank, where the village keeps the ducking stool. It's an ominous contraption, a long wooden beam balanced on a pivot with a chair strapped to one end. It's not a toy. It's a tool of justice, specifically public humiliation for those accused of being scolds, troublemakers, or women with too many opinions, depending on who's doing the accusing. You run your hand along the worn wood. It's been used recently. The water below is shallow and cold, filled with reeds and the occasional frog. If you're lucky, ducking is symbolic. One quick dunk, a round of laughter, and everyone goes home. If not, it means repeated submersions, each one colder and more humiliating than the last. The goal? Silence the accused. or at least teach them a lesson the village won't forget. But justice here isn't all formal trials and priestly pronouncements. Much of it is gossip-based, decided over fences, under trees, or beside bread ovens. Accusations are often fueled by rumor. That woman who talks to her cat too much? Suspicious. The man who doesn't attend church every week? Worth watching. The girl who cures headaches with rosemary and whispers? Dangerous. The reeve, the bailiff, or even the parish priest might act on these whispers. No need for proof. Just enough murmured concern, and suddenly someone's being questioned, or dunked, or locked in the stocks for spreading unwholesome influence. Historians point out that these systems, while deeply flawed, kept the peace in a world without standing police forces or formal courts in every town. They were messy, biased, and easily abused, but they were fast and familiar. Everyone knew the rules, even if they bent them often. You glance at the ducking stool again and shiver, not from cold, but from imagining your own legs strapped to it, townsfolk watching, judging. Best to keep your head down, your voice low, and your neighbors content. In the medieval village, survival depends as much on your silence as your skill. Night falls gently over the village. The air grows colder. The last of the smoke curls from the chimneys, and families retreat indoors to whatever warmth their hearths can provide. You shuffle into your cottage, feet tired, fingers stiff, and you're greeted not by solitude, but by a room already full, with people, smells, and one very opinionated goat. In medieval homes, sleeping alone is rare. Beds are expensive, space is limited, and warmth is a shared resource. You sleep alongside siblings, cousins, maybe even your grandparents, stacked together like mismatched spoons in a drawer. Privacy isn't even a concept. It's just you, the others, and the goat, who has somehow decided the middle of the mattress is hers now. The bed is little more than a wooden frame with ropes crisscrossed beneath a straw mattress, if your family's fortunate enough to own one. If not, it's just blankets on the floor, layered with anything soft enough to cushion the cold. Everyone crowds in, jostling for the warmer spots. The baby gets the middle. Adults take the edges. You, somewhere in between, tangled in someone's foot and another person's elbow. The goat, Agnes, always Agnes, sleeps by your knees, chewing something imaginary and occasionally sighing as if to say, "I was here first." Historians describe these arrangements as the norm, not the exception. The idea of personal space simply didn't exist in the same way. Beds were communal, intimate, and essential. And no one found it strange. That's just how families survived cold nights without central heating or even proper insulation. Still, the sounds, the smells, the sheer number of limbs, it can be a lot. It can be a cousin snores like a church bell. Someone mutters in their sleep. Someone else kicks. Agnes snorts dramatically and shifts her weight onto your feet. You sigh, shift, and wedge your hand under a shared pillow. "Good night," you whisper silently to the ceiling, knowing that if one person wakes up for the chamber pot, all of you probably will. As you try to settle into sleep, wedged between your cousin's knees and Agnes the goat's hindquarters, you pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders, or at least the tattered thing pretending to be a blanket. It smells faintly of old stew, wet wool, and a hint of something you'd rather not identify. But it's warm, and that's what matters. In a medieval home, real blankets are a luxury. Most families make do with heavy cloaks, woven mats, patched furs, or even straw layered between sheets of rough linen. Yours seems to be a former cape that's been stitched, restitched, and possibly turned inside out more than once to hide holes. Still, when night falls and the air turns to ice, you're grateful for every inch of it, scratches, smells, and all. If your family's lucky, you might have one woolen blanket passed down through generations. Its original color now a mystery lost to time and smoke. Others sleep under layers of spare tunics, cloaks, and even sacks. There's a kind of creativity to it. Anything soft and cleanish becomes part of the bedding rotation. The blanket you're sharing has at least 3 owners tonight. You've claimed the bottom corner, which unfortunately leaves your feet exposed. Your brother, tangled at the other end, seems to have cocooned himself like a hibernating hedgehog. You tug gently, he grumbles, and the goat snorts in disapproval. Historians write about how people layered their bedding with surprising care, using straw mattresses, feather-filled bolsters, and thick quilts if they had the means. But for the majority, warmth was communal, and the definition of blanket was generous at best. You breathe into your hands, curled beneath the itchy fabric. Somewhere outside, the wind howls softly through the thatched eaves. Inside, you've got half a blanket, half a pillow, and a goat for company. It's not comfortable exactly, but it's familiar. And as your body starts to warm your little pocket of air beneath the covers, you start to believe, just maybe, you'll make it through another chilly medieval night. You'd think with a long day of work behind you, sleep would come easy. But once the fire burns low and the last whispers die out beneath your shared blanket, the cottage takes on a different life, a chorus of nighttime sounds that seem determined to keep you half awake. First, the snoring. It starts soft like a cat purring, then it grows deep, wheezy, and somehow rhythmic, as though the snorer is composing a lullaby only a goat could love. You try to tune it out, but your cousin across the way joins in with a nasal whistle that could wake the saints. For a moment, the two of them duet. Then the goat sneezes and silence falls, briefly. Then come the mice. Tiny feet skitter across the beams overhead. You hear them nibbling at something in the corner, probably the crust you thought you swept away earlier. The scratching is persistent, just enough to make you wonder if they've chewed their way into the bedding. You don't want to check. You just pull the blanket closer and hope they stay in their lane. The wind picks up outside, slipping through the cracks in the wattle and daub. It makes the cottage creak and whistle. One shutter slaps lazily against the wall until someone, grumbling, gets up to wedge a bucket in front of it. It helps slightly. And then there's the outhouse situation. Nature calls. Always, especially at night. If you're lucky, someone remembered to bring the chamber pot close to the bed. If not, it's a barefoot dash across cold stone floors and into the dark yard, where the outhouse leans at an alarming angle and smells like a decision you'll regret. The sounds of someone braving the journey are unmistakable. A groan, the creak of the door, the shuffle of feet, and the clang of a lid being dropped too hard. Historians often overlook these details in grand tales of medieval life. But this is what most people remember, the sounds that remind you you're not alone, even when you wish you were. You exhale and close your eyes. With any luck, sleep will win, eventually. Just as your body begins to sink into a restless, shared warmth, your mind starts playing tricks. A creak from the rafters, a rustle near the hearth, a shadow flickering across the wall from the dying fire. Your eyes snap open, and your first thought isn't rats or thieves. It's demons. In the medieval world, nighttime wasn't just inconvenient. It was dangerous. People truly believed that darkness gave way to spirits, witches, and creatures that fed on vulnerable souls. You don't just sleep. You protect yourself while doing it. That's why your mother hangs a row of dried herbs above the door. It's why your sister won't sleep with her feet uncovered, and it's why Nan insists on whispering a protective prayer as she dabs lavender oil on her temples. You mutter a few lines yourself just to be safe. Something about St. Cuthbert's shield and a chicken's feather. Not your best work, but it'll do. Then there's the lice. As if demons weren't enough. Every few nights your head starts itching like a curse from a jilted fairy. You scratch under the blanket, trying not to wake anyone, and pray the little beasts have chosen someone else tonight. Some folks wear a cap to bed, hoping to confuse the lice. Others rub their scalps with vinegar, or steep rosemary in hot water and dab it behind the ears. You once heard someone swear by goose grease, but that sounded more like a prank than a remedy.
Historians now understand lice were a universal medieval nuisance, along with fleas, bedbugs, and mites. People accepted them, complained about them, and occasionally staged mass combing sessions, where relatives deloused one another while chatting over soup. You reach for your scratchy wool cap, tug it down, and try to ignore the occasional tickle on your neck. The goat sighs in her sleep. Someone mumbles about angels, and somewhere in the shadows beyond the hearth, the night watches back. But you've said your prayer, pulled your cap low, and buried your nose in the blanket. If demons come, you're at least ready to meet them half asleep. The next morning, your boots are laced, your satchel is packed with a bit of bread and cheese, and you're off, on foot naturally, for a nearby village to fetch supplies. It's only a few miles, they say. Just follow the old cart path, past the oak, then veer left where the sheep used to gather. Sounds simple enough. Until you realize that medieval directions often rely on landmarks that no longer exist, or never existed in the first place. Maps don't count on them. If they exist at all, they're more like artistic expressions than functional tools. The rivers are vaguely correct, the towns are in the general direction, and there's usually a dragon doodled in the corner just to keep things interesting. Most folks never travel far from where they were born, and why would they? The world beyond your parish is wild, poorly marked, and full of uncertainty. Within an hour, the path turns from dirt to mud, then vanishes altogether under a patch of brambles. You double back. Was it the third tree or the fifth? The field with the tall grass or the one with the angry goose? You shout for help. No one answers. The trees lean in a bit closer than they did 10 minutes ago, and suddenly the whole forest feels like it's judging you. You stumble upon a fork in the trail. No signposts, no stones marked with runes, just your gut and a prayer. You pick a path and hope it's the one that doesn't end at a marsh or a bandit camp. Historians suggest that medieval people had strong local mental maps formed by habit rather than charts. But when asked to explain a route, they relied on seasonal details. Turn where the wild garlic blooms, or after the frost, the brook is passable. Great, if you're from around here. Useless, if you're not. Eventually, you spot smoke in the distance. Maybe a hearth, maybe a chimney. Either way, it's civilization. You sigh in relief. Shoes caked in muck, pride slightly bruised. Next time you think, maybe bring someone who's made the trip before. Your relief at finding the village is short-lived. On your return journey, as the path narrows and trees thicken around you, your mind wanders to the other kind of medieval travel hazard, the two-legged kind. Bandits, highwaymen, footpads. Whatever you call them, they're the reason every wise traveler carries a walking stick and a well-practiced excuse about having no coin worth taking. The forest ahead is quiet. Too quiet. You grip your stick a little tighter and pretend you're just stretching your shoulders. Every snapped twig becomes suspicious. Every bird that stops singing. A warning. Somewhere behind a bush, a hungry man might be watching, waiting to leap out and demand your bread, your pouch, your shoes, or all of the above. You hurry along, and soon enough, you reach the old bridge that crosses the river back toward your village. And there stands another medieval obstacle, the toll man. He's not official, no badge. Just a big hat, a bigger belly, and a spear longer than you are tall. Passage fee, he grunts. You point out you already paid. Last week, same bridge, same grunt. He shrugs. Prices go up. Medieval inflation is terrifyingly arbitrary. You try to negotiate. He eyes your satchel. You offer cheese. He takes it without comment and waves you through. Whether he's a bandit or just a bored shepherd with good marketing, you don't ask. Bridges themselves are another matter. Rarely maintained, often crooked, and always slick with moss, they seem designed to test your ankle flexibility. Some have missing planks. Others creak with every step like they're whispering, "Jump, coward." You edge across slowly, arms out like a tightrope walker, praying the goat hair in your shoes gives enough traction. Historians note that medieval travel was both physically and psychologically draining. Roads were unreliable, protection was minimal, and many people simply never left their local area. Why risk a twisted knee, robbed satchel, or sudden toll fee when home was hard enough? You reach the far bank, heart still thumping, and mutter under your breath, "Next time, I'll just skip the cheese." By the time the sun begins to dip behind the hills, you're too far from home to make it back before dark. You eye the trees nervously. Night in the woods is no place for a lone traveler, so you head to the nearest village, hoping for lodging. You're not expecting luxury. A roof, a bench, maybe a blanket that doesn't crawl. The alehouse, as usual, is the hub of all things: food, gossip, and sleep. You enter, nod politely to the barkeep, and ask about a bed for the night. He grunts and gestures to a bench near the hearth. It's short, stained, and slightly sticky. You've slept on worse, but not by much. If you're lucky, someone offers space on their floor. "Got room by the hearth," they say. You smile gratefully, only to find out room means sharing straw bedding with two sweaty farmhands and a sheepdog that licks its feet all night. Privacy, not here. Clean linen. Let's not joke. There's always the stables. Warm from the animals, yes, but also home to fleas, dung, and a hen that resents your presence. Still, for some travelers, it's preferable to the public room, where snoring strangers breathe heavily 2 inches from your ear, and someone always mistakes your cloak for a chamber pot. Bathing? Don't ask. Latrines. A questionable ditch behind the barn. Dinner, if offered, is a piece of bread and whatever's left from someone else's bowl. You eat quietly, aware that conversation costs energy and warmth is measured in proximity to the fire, not personality. Historians note that medieval inns varied wildly. Some were clean and welcoming. Others were health hazards with rats that paid no mind to personal boundaries. Most inns charged little for space but expected you to bring your own blanket, and sometimes your own spoon. As you curl up, wrapped in your cloak, using your satchel as a pillow, you reflect that at least at home you knew whose feet you were sleeping next to. Tonight, you sleep with one eye open and both hands on your pouch. By the time you finally return to your village, muddy, sore, short one piece of cheese and a considerable amount of pride, you begin to understand something deep in your bones. Why most people in the medieval world rarely traveled farther than a few miles from where they were born. Travel isn't just difficult, it's exhausting, unpredictable, and often dangerous. Roads are unmarked and rutted, forests are thick with shadows and bandits. Rivers flood without warning, villages are suspicious of strangers, and that's before your shoes fall apart halfway through the journey. You pass by old Martin's cottage on the way in. He's never left the village in 70 years. "Why would I?" he once said. "Everything I need is here, my fields, my goats, my gossip." And maybe he's right. Home has food, usually. Familiar faces, your own straw mattress, however lumpy. The goat knows your name. What more could you want? Historians confirm that medieval life was incredibly localized. Parish boundaries weren't just spiritual, they were social borders. Your world was often defined by what you could walk to and back before sundown. Anything beyond that? Exotic, mysterious, and best left to traveling merchants or peddlers with unusually strong calves. Even festivals and fairs drew from only nearby regions, and those who ventured farther, pilgrims, messengers, tradespeople, were seen as either brave or slightly touched in the head. Roads weren't improved until centuries later. Bridges collapsed and stayed collapsed. If you found a place that wasn't full of fleas, mud, or someone trying to sell you a questionably alive fish, you stayed there. You reach your door, wave to Agnes the goat, and step inside, greeted by the smell of stew and the familiar creak of your favorite chair. You sit. You sigh. Your toes might never forgive you, but your heart is oddly content.
Next time someone mentions a quick trip to the next village, you'll just shake your head and say, "Not unless they send a goat cart for me."
It starts with a cough, not a violent one, just a little tickle in your chest that won't quite go away. You ignore it for a few days, but then someone notices. You get that look, the one that says, "Please don't bring a plague into my cottage." By the end of the week, Nan's at your door with a wool bundle and a serious expression. You're going to be examined. Now you might be imagining thermometers, pulses, or something remotely scientific. Not quite. Diagnosis, in the medieval world, is part medical knowledge, part spiritual interpretation, and part educated guesswork. The first step, astrology. Nan squints at the sky. Venus is rising, she murmurs. And Mars is in a bad mood. You nod solemnly, as if this explains your sore throat. She pulls out a dog-eared almanac and traces her finger along a faded chart. Your liver might be jealous of your lungs, she decides. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds like your organs are having a lover's quarrel. Next comes the urinal, not the device. This is a small flask where you've been instructed to, well, contribute. The color, clarity, and scent of your urine are all inspected in the daylight, ideally against a white cloth, and compared to a chart that's been handed down for generations. You overhear words like choleric and phlegmatic. At one point, she smells it and says it smells too cheerful. You don't ask. Historians note that urine inspection was actually one of the most common diagnostic tools in the Middle Ages. Medical treatises included elaborate color wheels, and some university-trained physicians could spend an entire consultation analyzing just the urine without even looking at the patient. Astrology, meanwhile, was thought to guide the balance of your humors. Each organ was ruled by a planet, and treatment timing was determined by celestial positioning. Is your spleen acting up during Mercury's retrograde? Better hold off on that leeching. You sit, wrapped in a blanket, sipping watery ale as Nan consults the stars and your sample. She nods at last. You'll live, but maybe avoid pears this week. Fair enough. After your urine's been analyzed and the stars have offered their opinion, it's time for an actual remedy. Nan disappears into her cottage, returns with a grin, and hands you a mug. It smells like feet. Spicy feet. "Drink," she says, holding it up like it's a gift from heaven. Inside is a steaming brew of garlic, honey, vinegar, and something that might be crushed mustard seed, or possibly gravel. Either way, the smell is overwhelming. Garlic is the cure for nearly everything, at least according to the wisdom of your village. Got a fever? Garlic tea. Toothache? Garlic paste. Cough. Chew raw cloves. Protection from evil spirits? Hang it above the door, rub it on your boots, or wear it as a necklace. Just don't expect any wedding proposals. You down the potion, nose pinched, eyes watering. It burns all the way down and leaves a trail of regret in its wake. But you do feel slightly better, or at least too distracted by the aftertaste to focus on the cough. Historians now recognize that garlic has genuine antimicrobial properties, and it was one of the few medieval remedies that could actually help. Of course, that didn't stop people from using it in ways that were more enthusiastic than effective, like sticking cloves in your ears to cure headaches, or rubbing it on your forehead to repel bad dreams. In your village, garlic is grown in nearly every garden. It's easy to store, hard to mistake, and smells strong enough to convince most people it must be doing something. Nan insists her garlic syrup once cured a monk who'd gone mute. The monk, for the record, denies this, but he's usually chewing something, so it's hard to tell. You burp and the entire room smells like a soup pot that's gone rogue. Nan smiles proudly. "There," she says, patting your back. "You're practically invincible now." You're not sure if she's right, but you are sure no one's going to sit next to you at tomorrow's market. You're feeling a little better, maybe thanks to the garlic, maybe because your body's simply tired of complaining. But just to be safe, Nan says it's time to rebalance your humors. You gulp. That phrase rarely leads anywhere pleasant. In medieval medicine, sickness isn't just something you catch. It's a misalignment of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. And the best way to fix it? Get rid of one. First up, bleeding. She fetches a small brass bowl and a curved knife that looks like it's seen more stew than surgery. Just a nick, she says reassuringly, tying a cloth tightly around your forearm to raise a vein. You look away. The cut is shallow, but the sight of your own blood swirling into the bowl is enough to make you dizzy. You're lucky, she says, inspecting the color. Looks balanced. You nod faintly, trying not to faint. If bleeding doesn't suit your case, or if you're already looking too pale, there's always sweating. A hot herbal bath in a cauldron, or being wrapped in steaming cloths near the fire will usually do the trick. The goal is to cook the badness out. Problem is, you're left weak, soaked, and slightly pickled. Sweating draws out sin, Nan says. You're not sure about that, but it definitely draws out your will to move. And finally, if neither works, purging. That's the polite word for vomiting or the other kind of evacuation. This is accomplished with herbal concoctions that would terrify even the bravest goat. You've heard tales of brewmasters doubling over after a single sip of purging tea, which is more root, bark, and bile than actual drink. Historians tell us these methods were based on centuries of theory, some borrowed from ancient Greek texts, others passed down from monk physicians. Whether they worked is debatable. Some patients improved, others didn't, but everyone agreed, if you weren't suffering a little, it probably wasn't medicine. You lie back, bandaged and damp. Grateful Nan skipped the purge this time. She hands you a boiled onion and says, "Keep warm, avoid strong cheese, and don't look at the moon." You nod. Good advice, probably. Just when you think your treatment is over, Nan reaches into her bundle and pulls out a charm, an old coin wrapped in a bit of faded red cloth tied with horsehair. "For lingering illness," she says. "Hang it above your bed." You nod again. At this point, you'll try anything that doesn't involve leeches or nettle enemas. In medieval times, medicine and magic aren't separate things. They blend together like herbs in a pot, science, superstition, and religion all simmering in the same cauldron. For every poultice, there's a prayer. For every salve, a spell. And for every ailment, a saint. You're told to keep a bit of rosemary in your shoes to ward off fever, to sleep with a clove of garlic under your pillow for protection, to recite the Pater Noster 3 times while walking backward around your bed if the cough returns. It's a long list, and always there are the saints. Saint Apollonia, toothache protector extraordinaire, has a little wooden carving in the corner of Nan's shelf. You light a stub of a beeswax candle and mutter a few words, hoping she forgives your earlier complaints about her particular style of dental justice. Saint Sebastian is for plague, Saint Roche for sores, Saint Blaise for throat troubles, and if all else fails, someone swears by Saint Wulfstan, though nobody remembers exactly what he protects. Possibly goats, possibly gossip. Historians are fascinated by how deeply everyday people wove faith and folk healing together. There's no tension between praying and applying mustard poultices. You do both, and then you wait. And hope. Nan hands you the charm with great ceremony, saying it was blessed by a wandering friar with unusually clean fingernails. You hang it near your bed, say a quick prayer, and wonder if it's the cloth, the coin, or the faith doing the work. The important thing is that you've done something. You lie back, breathing in the faint smell of sage and old smoke, and whisper to the ceiling, "Saint Apollonia. No offense, but I hope I don't need you again anytime soon."
It's been a while since your last full-body wash. You've done the basics, of course. Splashed your face, rubbed vinegar under your arms, changed your shift once or twice. But a true bath.
That's an occasion. And in your village, that occasion means a trip to the bathhouse. If, of course, your parish has one that hasn't been condemned or converted into a pig shelter. You shuffle down the muddy lane toward the public bathhouse, a half-timbered building with steam curling from the roof, and laughter drifting from its open windows.
Inside, it's warm and damp, filled with the scent of herbs, lavender, mint, maybe even rosemary if the owner's in a good mood. Buckets clatter, tubs slosh, and voices rise in a chorus of chatter and complaints. Bathing in the Middle Ages isn't private. It's a social event. Men and women sometimes bathe separately, sometimes together, depending on local custom and how relaxed the church is feeling that year. The tubs are big enough to sit in with your knees up, and the water is, well, watercolored. It's been used by several people before you, but it's still warmer than the creek. You scrub with a cloth and a bar of lye soap that stings a little. Someone asks about your neighbor's missing goose. Someone else gossips about the steward's daughter and the traveling friar. You soak, you eavesdrop, you try to ignore the man in the corner clipping his toenails with a knife meant for cheese. Historians note that bathhouses were more common than most people think, especially in towns and cities. They weren't just for hygiene, they were meeting places, relaxation zones, and sometimes centers of moral concern. Some gained reputations for, let's say, extracurricular activities. That's when the sermon started. You finish with a rinse of lukewarm water over your head, step out into the cool air feeling 10 pounds lighter, and wrap yourself in a damp linen towel that may or may not be yours. Refreshed? Sort of. Cleaner? Definitely. Less likely to be mistaken for a walking ham. One can hope. Of course, not every village boasts a steamy bathhouse with rosemary-scented water and a neighbor willing to lend you a towel. Most days, your version of getting clean is a bit more rustic. You fill a wooden basin with water drawn from the well, now slightly cloudy from the last rain. It's cold, always cold. But it's better than nothing. You strip down behind a cart or screen, splash yourself as best you can, and then reach for your most versatile cleaning tool. Not a bar of soap, but a dull-edged knife and a bowl of fine wood ash. That's right. You're about to scrape yourself clean. The process is simple and surprisingly widespread. You gently drag the knife, more like a flattened spoon, really, across your skin, shaving off layers of dirt, dead cells, and who knows what else. It's oddly satisfying, if a bit gritty. Then you rub yourself with ash or sand to remove oil and smells. The result? Slightly pinker skin and a vague sensation of rough cleanliness. Soap exists, yes, but it's not common. It's made from animal fat and lye, both of which are precious. If you're lucky enough to own some, you save it for clothes, not your armpits. Nan claims the soap she once made from pig tallow and nettles burned a hole through her washcloth. You believe her. Hair gets the same treatment. Washed occasionally with barley water, vinegar, or, if you're feeling luxurious, an egg yolk. Lice. Picked out by hand during family evenings, often with as much chatting as combing. The social grooming hour, if you will. Historians agree that people weren't indifferent to cleanliness. They just worked with what they had. Ash scrubs, scraping tools, herbal rinses. Bathing was as much about ritual as it was about results. And besides, when everyone smells the same, it's easy to ignore. You finish your wash with a handful of cold water to the face. The goat watches. She seems unimpressed. But you feel better. Raw-skinned and chilly, but better. Once you've survived your medieval bath, half knife scrape, half emotional endurance test, you turn to your hair. Or rather, the tangled, wind-matted thing that lives on top of your head. It hasn't seen a comb in a few days, and at least one bird might have mistaken it for a nest last week. Time for a bit of grooming. The first step? Ashes again. A bit of fine ash from the hearth, mixed with water or vinegar, is rubbed into the scalp to absorb oil. It smells like last night's fire and stings if you have a scratch, but it works, sort of. Some folks add herbs like rosemary or lavender if they have them. Others swear by rainwater for shine, though catching enough for a rinse is its own challenge. Combs, when you can afford one, are carved from wood or bone and passed down like family treasure. Yours has 4 teeth missing and a crack in the handle, but it does the job. You start at the ends. working your way up slowly to avoid pulling out half your scalp. Tangled? Always. Lice? Probably. You comb anyway. For hold, you've got options. Want your hair slicked back? Use a dab of animal fat or goose grease. Want volume? Dust in a little chalk or flour, not too much, or you'll look like a half-baked pastry. People with long hair braid it tightly, not for fashion, but function. It keeps it out of the fire, the food, and the faces of passing goats. Beards get the same attention. Combed, trimmed with knives, occasionally scented with beer or ale if someone spills. Historians believe that despite the grime, medieval people took pride in their hair. It was a public feature, a sign of age, status, and effort. You finish with a scrap of cloth tied around your head like a band. It keeps the hair in place and the lice, allegedly, confused. You glance at your reflection in a puddle. Not perfect, but in this world, not matted, is practically a royal look. After dealing with your hair, greased, plaited, and vaguely smoky, you turn your attention to your teeth. You haven't had sugar in weeks, and your one remaining molar still throbs when you chew bark that's a little too firm, but you're not about to walk around with moss growing between your incisors. To brush your teeth, you reach for a birch twig. You chew one end until it frays into a brush-like cluster, then gently rub it across each tooth. The taste is woody, faintly bitter, and oddly refreshing. It's not mint, but it gets the job done. Some villagers use sage or thyme sprigs for this, and a few old-timers swear by salt rubbed on the gums to keep them lively. You tried that once. Your tongue didn't forgive you for 2 days. Charcoal is another common trick, ground into a powder and dabbed onto your finger. It's gritty, dark, and gets everywhere, but it absorbs odors and leaves your teeth a strange kind of squeaky clean. At least, until your next mug of ale undoes the effort. Breath, however, is another story. Medieval cuisine is heavy on onions, garlic, and fermented things. There are no breath mints, just cloves, parsley, or sucking on a small pebble to keep your mouth busy and your breath disguised. Some people carry sachets of herbs or wear pomanders around their necks. Small, scented balls filled with dried lavender, crushed cinnamon, or frankincense, supposedly to purify the air. But let's be honest, they're also a polite way to suggest you may have recently offended the noses of those around you. Historians point out that while dental decay was a reality, many medieval people had decent teeth by modern standards, thanks to low sugar diets and abrasive food. The problem was more breath than rot, and in a crowded, smoky world, people simply got used to it. You pop a clove into your cheek, rub your jaw where that molar once sat, and try not to breathe too heavily in anyone's direction. Not perfect, but you've done your best. And in medieval terms, that's practically grooming royalty. You're finally tucked in, nestled beneath a patchwork of wool and hope, when sleep creeps in, slow, thick, like fog rolling over the moors. But rest in the medieval world doesn't come free of charge. Every dream has meaning, every shadow holds potential, and the line between sleeping and divining is as thin as a goose feather. Last week, you dreamed of teeth falling out. Nan said it meant someone in the village would die soon. This morning, a crow landed on your cottage roof and cawed exactly 3 times. You're still waiting to find out what that means, but you suspect it's not great. And last spring, your cousin dreamed of drowning and woke up to find the piglet had gotten into the well. Coincidence? Not in this village. Dreams are taken seriously. They're signs, warnings, glimpses of things to come, or things already happening behind your back. Most folks know at least 3 dream interpretations by heart, passed down from a grandmother who swore she once saw St. Margaret herself in a thundercloud. Nan keeps a dream book, a worn leather volume filled with illustrations of eyes, hands, and fish, always fish. According to the book, dreaming of fire means passion, unless it's cold fire, in which case it means betrayal. If you dream of goats, it depends on which way they're facing. And if you dream of bread crumbling in your hands, that's definitely about money or fleas. Possibly both. Historians confirm that medieval people saw dreams as a mix of spiritual messages and psychological cues. Some believed they were divine revelations. Others blamed digestion. Either way, you don't just roll over and forget a dream. You talk about it, dissect it, and maybe change your day because of it. You drift off now, unsure what you'll dream tonight. Hopefully not rats or weddings. Those are expensive, even in dreams. And if you do wake up remembering anything strange, well, that's tomorrow's mystery. For now, just breathe slow, tuck your hand under your cheek, and let the crows and symbols sort themselves out. Sometime in the middle of the night, long after the goat has settled and the snores have found a synchronized rhythm, your eyes flutter open. It's not a nightmare. It's not noise, it's just time. In the medieval world, sleep doesn't come in one uninterrupted stretch. Instead, most people sleep in 2 shifts, separated by a period of quiet wakefulness, the watching hour, as some call it. You lie still in the darkness, aware of the cold creeping back in as the fire burns low. Someone on the far side of the room shifts beneath the covers. A foot sticks out, then vanishes. The baby whimpers and is hushed. It's quiet, but not silent. This is the hour when dreams dissolve, when prayers are whispered, and when minds drift into the strange space between night and morning. You rise quietly, careful not to wake the goat, who takes being disturbed very personally, and shuffle to the hearth. The embers have faded to a faint orange glow. You toss on a few sticks, blow gently, and coax the flame back to life. It crackles, reluctant but willing, and the warmth begins to return. This in-between time isn't wasted. Many use it to think, pray, mend things by firelight, or even have quiet conversation. Some scholars call it the first sleep and the second sleep, a natural rhythm, especially in a world without electric light. It's not insomnia. It's just part of the night. You sip a bit of leftover ale, stretch your toes by the fire, and rub the stiffness from your shoulders. Outside, the wind rustles through the trees. Inside, the house breathes softly around you. Historians believe that this segmented sleep was the norm until artificial lighting changed the human clock. But here, now, in your one-room cottage with the straw mattress and snoring relatives, it feels entirely natural. Soon the second wave of sleep will carry you back down, but for now you poke the fire one last time, lay back down, and let the orange glow lull you once again toward dreams. You've drifted back into bed, the fire casting sleepy shadows on the wall, and you're just beginning to feel your muscles soften when you remember, again, that not everyone sleeps with peace of mind. In your world, night isn't just for resting, it's for protecting what's yours, and even in your humble home, you keep a few quiet defenses tucked nearby, just in case. Beside the hearth, leaning against the wall, is your old wooden staff. It's not fancy, but it's solid, close enough to grab quickly if someone, or something, decides to knock, sneak, or climb through a shutter. Some keep knives under their pillows, though you never trusted sharp things that close to your neck. Others leave a dog inside, trained to growl at anything unfamiliar. In your case, Agnes the goat has proven surprisingly vocal about suspicious noises. You suspect she has opinions on burglars and foxes alike. Then there are the charms. Hanging above the door is a pouch of salt and crushed fennel, tied shut with red thread. It's supposed to ward off evil spirits. You don't remember who gave it to you. Nan, probably, but you'd never take it down. A sprig of rowan hangs near the window. A piece of iron sits beneath your bed. The iron's rusty and probably useless in any real fight, but no one wants to test what might happen if it's removed. Historians note that many medieval people were deeply superstitious, not because they were foolish, but because their world was fragile. Crops failed, thieves prowled, illnesses crept in with the fog, so they layered protections, spiritual, physical, and homemade. Some sang psalms before sleep. Others whispered blessings over their children's heads.
Everyone had something. You adjust your cloak around your shoulders, press your hand briefly against the wooden floor and glance toward the shutter, still closed. Still quiet. You feel the staff's weight nearby. That'll do. You close your eyes, not all the way, but enough. In the Middle Ages, rest is a skill, and trust.
That's earned night by night. It's nearly morning now. You can feel it. Not because of a clock, but in your bones, in the change of air.
The fire has burned low again. The goat shifts in her sleep, sighs, and nestles deeper into the straw. Outside, a cock crows once, then again, uncertain if it's too early. You don't move. This is the best part of the day. The world holds its breath in these last moments before dawn. It's not dark, but not yet light. Just a gentle gray that creeps across the floorboards, softening every edge. Even the snoring has stopped, replaced by the steady sound of breathing. You lie still, awake but resting, eyes half open, as if blinking too loudly might disturb the spell. This hour belongs to no one. The chores haven't started. The bells haven't rung. The mud hasn't yet found your shoes. It's just you and the quiet, rare, precious, and impossibly tender. Your body aches, sure. From the field, from the cold, from the awkward angle of a foot in your ribcage that someone else forgot was there. But you don't mind. You're warm, you're home, and for a little while no one needs anything from you. Historians sometimes write about the hardship of medieval life, the toil and sickness, the dirt and labor. And it's true. You've lived it. But what they don't always describe is this fleeting peace before the day begins, when the embers glow just enough to see your breath, when the goat hasn't yet demanded her breakfast, when the whole village for once is quiet. You let your eyes close again, just for a moment longer. The chores will wait. The mud will wait, but for now, you listen to the stillness, feel your limbs sink into the warmth of shared blankets and soft wool. The world will call soon. But right now, you just breathe. And now, as the medieval world you've wandered through begins to fade from view, take one last deep breath. Let your body settle, just as they would have, beneath a scratchy wool blanket, beside a glowing hearth, lulled by the steady breath of family, animals, and the night's final hush. Imagine the straw beneath you, uneven but warm. The scent of smoke and herbs still clinging to your hair. The faint rustle of leaves outside your shuttered window.
A distant church bell that hasn't rung yet, but will. You've trudged muddy roads, shared stew with goats.
Face down toothaches and dreams full of crows. You've outwitted pickpockets, ducked gossip, survived garlic potions, and stared down a carpenter's idea of a pillow. Through it all, you've discovered something rare in history books. Not battles, not kings, but the slow, honest rhythm of ordinary life. And here, in these last moments before sleep, let that rhythm carry you. Let it soften your thoughts like worn linen on skin. Let it quiet the noise of your own day, and replace it with the creak of a wooden floor, the hush of a fire gone dim, the knowing that tomorrow will come, just as it always does, with its aches, chores, and small joys. But for now, for just a little longer, stay here. Breathe slowly. Let the heaviness pull gently on your limbs. Let the sounds around you, real or imagined, melt into stillness. You are safe. You are home. You've survived another day in the medieval world, and now, finally, you may rest. Sweet dreams.